Hi guys, and welcome to another review for film and game composers. I am Meena Shamaly, and today I will be taking you through Strezov Sampling's ORACLE. So this is a modern sound design hybrid library, a definition that's kind of hard to define because it encompasses a lot of things. It encompasses a lot of ideas, a lot of genres. Sound design is very varied in its own nature. So it's kind of hard to put in a box, which is a good thing. It means there's a lot of use for this kind of thing. So according to the website, this has been developed by US-based composer Casey Edwards and published by Strezov Sampling. So the blurb says that it's a next-generation modern sound design library with over 300 presets, percussion hits, kits, loops, organic metals, and synth and gear and all that kind of stuff. So those are the sounds, some of the sounds that are included, and that's, I suppose, half the selling point. The other half is the user interface, which is custom built and custom scripted to handle and mess around with all these sounds and how they fit into your composition. So we'll have a look at these as we go through. And the price tag is $175 US. And hopefully by the end of the review we can conclude whether it is worth the asking price or how much bang you get for your buck. And hopefully you can hear for yourself some examples of what it is. Now there are already a few videos and audio demos for you to check out on the website. So I try not to cover everything that that Casey's covered in the videos, where he goes through the library and goes through every one of the functions and the panels. I'll try to cover some of the more unique aspects of this library and focus in on what makes this worth buying, and where we think it's got some stuff really right and where it might not have done as much. We'll check all that out. All right, so technical stuff requires the full version of 5.4.1 of Kontakt 5.4.1, so it will not work in the free player. So if you haven't bought the full version of Kontakt, I suggest you do, because you're missing out on a lot of libraries, a lot of good libraries. All right, installation. You get emailed after purchase. You get emailed your download links. You download a bunch of RAR files, which can be unpacked with a program like WinRAR or something. I don't know what the alternatives are, but that's the one I use. And yeah, it's a 1.43 gigabytes to download. You basically just unpack it, put it into a folder, and point Kontakt to that folder so you can access your sounds. Simple as anything. It's unpacks to 2.28 gigabytes. So relatively speaking, it's not that large by today's sample standards. But it's not about the size. Obviously, it is about what the sound's like and what can be done with it. So I think that's cool. That's enough technical stuff. Let's jump into the library, shall we? All right. So we'll have a look at the interface. As you can see, it is not in the libraries tab because it's not it requires the full version of Kontakt. So it will have to be accessed from the files browser over here, where you can see all the categories and blank preset, or through the quick load browser, where if it's the same thing, you just have to set it up that way. So you go to ORACLE, you got instruments. There are no multis, so you just got to worry about instruments. And same thing, same file structure. So I'll just be using the Files tab for this. Yeah, so there we go. So that's on Access. Now, we'll have a look at the interface and what the user can do to kind of mess up with these sounds. And we'll just load up a few sounds to help get us started with that look. Now, there's a whole bunch of standard things that are great that are included in the interface, but they're pretty standard as far as a lot of sound design and synth kind of stuff goes. So you got your filters, you got your EQ, and you got all your amplitude, pitch, and filter envelopes to use, and all these are used to different effects in the different presets. So you got your low pass, high pass, band pass filter. Obviously, low pass. This we just got a lead sound loaded up. So low pass and resonance, of course. Which can be some cool stuff. And any of these can be mapped to any MIDI controller. So if I map this to CC1, which is the mod wheel, you'll see it move as I move it. And of course you got band pass, which will just kind of focus in on a certain level of frequencies. And you got high pass, of course, which will cut off some of the low frequencies. So pretty standard stuff there. And then you got your EQ. That's your gain, your bandwidth for how much is being affected, and which frequency is controlling which. You got a legato control, so right now it's monophonic. And you got a glide control. For some reason that glide control gets a bit glitchy, so that might be addressed in an update. So if it does, just turn off the legato and turn it back on. So you can, if you make it really kind of that pretty extreme, you can get this kind of a siren effect. Sort of like if you watch Arrow, that's part of the soundtrack. It's this rising synth, which is just pretty much a big glide, and it sounds pretty cool on the show. Anyway, so that's that, and obviously you can change the amplitude. Oh, if you turn off the legato, of course, you can play chords. It's kind of. Let me just reload that. So it's pretty loud, some of these. Alright, so there you go. Now, obviously you can mess with it, and if you know how these run, so I'm not going to get into that. What's more interesting is some of the more unique features. This little feature called growl, which is sort of a mix between a filter and an EQ that kind of creates a formant. So if I turn it on, this number over here is actually which CC number can control growl. So right now it's set to 1, which is the mod wheel. So I'll put the mod wheel down, and I'll play the sound, and I'll put it up as we go. So you hear it growling. Put it up a little bit. Ugh, it's pretty loud. So it's a lot of this. This is the kind of dubsteppy thing, the typical dubsteppy thing, which is pretty cool if you want to control it that way. Or you can make it this kind of a big sweep. And combine that with the filter. So I can do. There's a lot that can be done there. So that's a pretty cool feature, pretty unique feature. I haven't seen it in many other things. And the other thing, which is pretty cool, is this little offset button. So this is velocity, so you can control. Let me change the patch to something like this. This is piano-esque. It's basically kind of like a piano patch. So if I change the velocity here, this basically controls the volume to velocity ratio. So you can make it really dynamic, or you can kind of compress the volume range, even if you're triggering different samples. This is me playing soft. And with me playing loud. They sound a lot closer together, a lot more compressed, even if the timbre kind of changes. So it's pretty cool to mess with that and get comfortable with your MIDI controller and how dynamic you want the patch to be. So offset kind of cuts into the attack of the sample. So right now it's just set to to start where the sample starts. And if I put it up a little bit, hear the sample cuts, so you can mess with that attack a little bit. It changes the character of the sound. Put it right up here. And you might benefit from putting the attack up a tiny bit so it doesn't click. And if you turn on this button, which is random, and turn the offset up, that becomes a maximum threshold. So it kind of messes with the sound a little bit and messes with the... kind of gives it a bit of a round robin effect, but it's not really. But it kind of makes each start of the sample sound different, or you can go really drastic with it. And if it's random, then you won't know what happens next. But of course, you can control it and set that to MIDI controllers. If I set that to the mod wheel instead, so I can control that myself within the composition. So yeah, so there you go. So that is some of the more unique aspects of the interface. The other thing of just these parts of the interface, we've got the sequencers, which I'll keep the piano sound happening, right? So we can just use the sequencer as it is. So you got 4 kinds of sequencers, and all 4 which can be used together at the same time. So you got ARP sequencer. And if this looks familiar, this is very similar to the stuff from Hybrid 2, from Project Alpha and Project Bravo, which by Casey's own admission, they said this might look familiar to our users because we share some similarities with our friends at Hybrid 2, which I'll just pull that quote right here, so you know. So with our own twist. So like usable features like advanced sequencing with our own twist, familiar to that from our friends over at Hybrid 2. So that's kind of their own thing. And that's one of the things that I think is important to keep in mind, because you might be thinking, okay, and this is actually what I thought. I thought when this came out, I was like, okay, so this is another Hybrid sound design library. We've already got Project Alpha and Project Bravo and the hybrid tools from ADIO and I think Euphoria from Universal Sampling. I think that's what they're called. So there's a whole bunch of things. Why would you want to? Especially when sound design depends on kind of it can be done. This can be done by a lot of people. I'm not saying, hey, anyone can do it, but it's, if you put in the work, you can actually design your own sounds and work in it in this way. What I think it is the fact that each one of these people, these developers, comes up with their own aesthetic look at it. And so like something like this will be Casey Edwards' own aesthetic. The Hybrid 2 stuff is Daniel James's own aesthetic. And then Euphoria is Jeff Hyatt's own aesthetic. That's the developer. And then Hybrid 2 is like Troels Folman's own aesthetic. And these are all very different schools of thought about approaching the same thing of sound design. And that's the cool thing about sound design, is that it is so different. You can do a whole bunch of different things and mangle sounds beyond recognition. So that's the important thing to keep in mind, I suppose, about these kinds of libraries. So this is what I came to realize as I was testing this library and checking it out. I realized, this has a very an aesthetic of its own, which I actually found a lot of it is very similar to Jesper Kyd, the composer from the early Assassin's Creed titles and Borderlands and State of Decay and all these kinds of things. You could probably put together a close rendition of a Jesper Kyd track using some of these sounds from Oracle. That's what I found as I was working with it. So it's a pretty cool thing, because that's my favorite composer. Anyway, back to this. We're looking at the ARP sequencer. Right, so if I turn it on, so right now it's just triggering the sound as it is. So I'm just going to turn it on to mono, and I'll see these numbers correspond to which key in the chord you're holding will be triggered by each of these. So right now this is about up to 4, so I'm just going to trigger 4 notes. Okay. And the rate, if I change the rate up to 16ths, then you can make this kind of wide. If you press reset, then it'll just reset all these numbers, and then you can just drag your own. So, and then I'm just being random. Maybe put it up to 5. So. So yeah, and then you got our little randomize, which will set up your own sequence for you, and you can go up to 8 keys. So here's 8 keys, so it'll play something in an octave. Just randomize, so it'll pick up something different here. Or you can just randomize it between 3 keys, like a chord or progression. So yeah, so that's some pretty cool stuff, and then you can just decide that to use the first 2. Or the first 4. So yeah, so it's really, really up to you. If you go poly, I think it'll ignore that and just play a chord. Yeah, that's what it'll do. So I'll put that back up to 16. Alright, so let me put that at 8. And just randomize it. 4. There we go. I'm just setting it to random. And put it to mono. So you can make it an arpeggiator, or you can make it a pulsing kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. Now at the same time, you can create a filter sequencer. So if we turn that on, this might work better with a different kind of thing. And what I might do actually is put on one of the ARPs, something kind of synthetic. This is something called string ostinato layer. If I'll turn on the filter sequencer, so the cutoff and the resonance kind of have different effects on how it responds. And you can change the LFO rate here. And then if you change the rate at which it responds, you can... So say for example, we set it this way, and this way. And set that to 4 bars. So it'll just recycle it. If we set it like this. So there, we combine some ARP sequencing with some filter sequencing. Then you got some volume sequencing, which is pretty cool. So if I turn that on and change the rate down. Maybe put that in with something else. Something like this. So here you've got your... You got an ARP sequencer, you got a filter sequencer, then you got a volume sequencer. So if I turn it on, you got some presets here, and these are triggered by these key switches down here. And it's pretty cool because if I set this to like... whatever it is. I'm just so you got some pretty cool stuff happening there. If I put it up to, maybe try it from a different. I'll turn on the volume equalizer, the volume sequencing. That's pretty cool. And the thing is, with these green key switches over here, you can actually change that rate. This isn't really reflecting it. Try this. Syndicate pulse. Okay. Volume sequence. So I'll just play that. So you get some pretty cool stuff there. Near. What we're looking at, hyperdrive bass. Turn on that. So this just kind of cuts into the volumes, right? And if I change the rate up here, put it up here. So you can really do some really fun stuff live. So yeah, so that's the sequencing, and then you can do a panning sequencing. Let's just try a different ARP. So this is a chordal kind of ARP. Oh no, it's not. Sorry. That's all one anyway. And here with the pan sequencing, so I could just do this little sweep of panning. Can I kind of here move it from one side to the other? So that's pretty cool. So you can get some instant effects, even if you just want to get something like this, something like this. I'm just randomizing it. So immediately you get a lot of motion, a lot of interesting motion just through using this. So that's your arpeggiators, and these can be used on anything. So if I pull up, I don't know, one of these synth sounds, whatever this is, Gleam. This probably won't help because it has a slow attack, but I can probably create a filter effect. There you go. Because it'll just carry through the sound. Or you can do a volume sequence. Put that at. If I turn on just the delay in the reverb, so you can. So here you had the actual sound. So you can already do some pretty cool stuff and maybe do something with the filter. If I kind of put the resonance down. Takes a while to come back down. or make it just 4. So immediately you got a lot to do there, even just with a standard sound. If I had something like this electric lead, whatever it is, I can turn it into a sequence. 4 notes. Turn it to 16th. And do everything I want. And there's some pretty cool stuff there. So yeah, so there we go. So that's all the sequencing. Last but not least, we'll look at the effects. So a lot of stock. These are basically stock standard effects from Kontakt. However, there's a couple of really cool features in there. So you got your lo-fi, your transient designer, which is kind of a compressor that controls attacks and sustains. And this is just your standard compressor. You got distortion, saturation, one knob, beautiful. Let me just turn off the sequence. Just one knob, I love it. You got a flanger and a phase. I've never really said this word out loud. Flanger, flange. I don't know. Chorus. Then you got your standard delay, and now 2 kinds of reverb here. You can go send or insert, and you can turn them both on or off separately. So this is the send reverb, and turn that off. Then you got an insert reverb here. And just turn off the delay. So here you can do an insert reverb, and they're both convolutions. Now they have their own library of impulse responses, and there's a special instruction as to how to approach that. So these, there's a little part of the script editor tells you where to actually put your IRs. So this, and they scripted it to show you where in your own computer you need to do that. So I've got them in there, and just be sure to check out the manual if you're gonna buy it. Check out the manual because there's a separate PDF file for the IRs. Anyway, so I can do an insert, and you can do some of those really kind of weird IRs which they've put in. For example, metalizer, right? So we've loaded up the IR. This is the insert. I'm going to turn it on. And combine it with it. If I put the size down, it becomes part of the character of the sound. See what we've done there? Now here we can change the send and see how it's got its own power. So for the send, let's just put in a, what are we doing? Yeah, send. Let's just put in a cathedral. 12 seconds, why not? Nah, church 5 seconds. Actually, no, cathedral 12 seconds. Let's do that. So now we'll just put the send down. Turn it on. And bring it in. And there you have it, folks. That's your reverb. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool implementation within the interface. So I'm quite glad with that. All right. So that's a look at the interface. I'll come back in a part 2 and just have a look through the patches and the sounds that are offered, and we will pick it up from there. See you in part 2.